And it is my privilege and honor to call the first meeting of the Police Accountability Board of 2024. And with that, it is time to read the public notice. To access this meeting remotely, join from a PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, or Android device using this URL listed below. If you do not wish for your name to appear on the screen, use the drop-down menu and click on Rename to rename yourself to be anonymous. To request to speak, use the raise hand icon on the screen. To join by phone, dial 1-669-900-6833 and enter meeting ID 826-5339-6072. If you wish to comment during the public comment portion of the agenda, press *9 and wait to be recognized. The city of Berkeley recognizes the community of River was built on the territory of the Huchun, the ancestral and unceded land of the Choshin-Yo, speaking Ohlone people, the ancestors and descendants of the sovereign Verona Band of Alameda County. This land was and continues to be of great importance to all the Ohlone tribes and descendants of the Verona Band. As we begin our meeting tonight, we acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of Berkeley, the documented 5,000-year history of the vibrant community at the West Berkeley Showdown, and the Ohlone people who continue to reside in the East Bay. We recognize that Berkeley's residents have and continue to benefit from the use and occupation of this unceded stolen land since the city of Berkeley's incorporation in 1878. As stewards of the laws regulating the city of Berkeley, it is not only vital that we recognize the history of this land, but also recognize that the Ohlone people are present members of Berkeley and other East Bay communities today. And with that, brings us to agenda item number 1, call to order and roll call.
Chair, Happy New Year, everyone. For the record, we started this meeting at 6:31 p.m. I will now proceed with roll call. Chair Moore.
Present.
Vice Chair Harris.
Here.
Board Member Calavia.
Here.
Board Member Lethwich.
Here.
Board Member Wilson.
Here.
Board Member Blackley. Here. Board Member Cayetano. Here. And Board Member Moses. Here. Present, we have 4.
Excellent. I'd like to welcome everyone back. And with that, it goes to agenda item number 2, which is the approval of the agenda. Are there any questions, concerns, anything that needs to be moved, changed, adapted? If not, can I ask for a motion? So moved.
A second.
Excellent. Now, do I hear any, I'm not hearing anyone who is against the motion, which will take us to agenda item number 3, public comment.
Okay. Welcome back for members of the public. As always, speakers are generally allotted up to 3 minutes, but maybe a lot less time if there are many speakers. You may comment on any matter within the board's jurisdiction at this time. With that said, I will start with those who are physically present and then move on to our virtual attendees. With that said, is there anybody here who would like to provide public comment? Okay. I'll then proceed to our virtual attendees. Are there any of our virtual attendees who would like to provide public comment? Chair, at this time, I don't see any raised hands.
Okay, not seeing any raised hands and no comments from the public. That takes us to agenda item number 4, approval of the minutes. This is for the regular minutes, the minutes for the regular meeting on December 6, 2023.
I move approval of minutes.
A second.
Excellent.
I can't second. Sorry. Yeah, because I was not here.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Okay.
I'm trusting you guys with everything that's it.
board member Lethwich didn't see any problems with the minutes. We're
Okay.
good. And that takes us to agenda item number 5, which is the ODPA staff report. And at this time, I'll take it to the director, please.
Good evening, board members, happy new year, members of the public. Just want to also recognize we got other colleagues from the city staff. We got the city attorney's office being represented by Stephen Hyland. We got the city manager's office being represented by Dr. Carey Arredondo. And we also have a new staff member from the city that will be presented shortly, Mr. Rex Brown. He's joining us remotely. I actually want to start with the introduction of Mr. Brown. His bio is included in the agenda. He is the city's inaugural diversity, equity, and inclusion officer. I had the opportunity to have a few discussions with him during the break. I know he's very excited about contributing to the city's diversity efforts, and one of his initial stops in having conversations with him, he wanted to come by the board in support of the work and see any synergy that may be available with the work that he'll be doing. So I wanted to yield to Mr. Brown to introduce himself and just talk a little bit about his background.
Thank you, Director. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. Thank you to the board for giving me this opportunity to speak with you. I've been involved with diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racist programming for over 20 years in federal, state, and local government. And I worked for 3 state cabinet offices, 1 city executive office, federal judicial branch, and most recently served with the Human Services Department within the city of Seattle on community safety. I want to be part of the work that you're doing here in the city of Berkeley. City of Berkeley, as you often say, is small, but has an outsized reputation for being a leader in just about every effort for equity throughout this country. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be among you as we move towards designing our goals, both internally with respect to our workforce, but also externally with respect to our programs and services, as well as operations. So I want to leverage the expertise that's already here and recognized within so many leaders within this city and in this very room, virtually and present at the office as well. I want to make it short. I don't want to suck all the air out of the rooms, virtually or otherwise. And I do want to answer any questions that you might have.
Let me open it up. That's great. And I'd like to first extend my own welcome and thank you for doing the work that you're doing. And I look forward to seeing if there's any way that we can collaborate. And that being said, is there any board member that would like to ask any questions? Board member Talia.
Welcome to Berkeley. Thank you for being here. I'm Kitty Calavita, and I've been on this body for quite a few years. I'm chairing the subcommittee on fair and impartial policing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering in what capacity you might be involved with us on the issue of racial disparities in policing.
Well, I think that is a central question for racial equity. The fairness in policing is a central tenet as to why we are here today in this room, why there have been iterations within changes after 48 years within this body, right? Because there is a perception and there is a reality of fairness and justice, and who is privy to fairness and justice. And it is not through feelings that we're going to get to the bottom of creating a more equitable community for everyone in all communities. It's through hard work. It's through scientific approach, the annotated evidence we have in abundance, the stories that people say, how they have been treated, how they have lived their lives. The community voice is central to this process. My participation, collaboration with you all is always in centering community voice in that conversation. But also there's an infrastructure issue, right? How do we make this sustainable? How do we go from ideas to actions that lead to outcomes that we are looking for? and that the community demands. But as I say, that is a road and perhaps a roadmap that is forged together, not individually, and not through guesswork.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else, staff or board members? I think you've given us a lot to think about, and you've got us with no questions, which very rarely happen.
Well-
And yeah, if there's nothing else, we do appreciate your time and taking it with us.
It's my utmost pleasure, and if I have your permission to do so, I'd like to stay for the remainder of the meeting.
Please.
Thank you so much. I'll go off camera. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I don't know, do you have any updates from the reimagining or anything, any announcements you want to make?
Yes, so we have successfully been rescheduled for our reimagining public safety presentation for a special council meeting, January 23rd. I'll be creating, once the Zoom invitation is ready to go, I'll be creating a save the date and I'll be sharing that with council and we'll be dispersing that with everyone. So sit tight and I hope to see many of you there.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, I also forgot and neglected to acknowledge the chief. I see her logged on, so I know she's gonna provide her report when her segment comes. Just want to make sure we know that she's logged on. Just a few from our office, a few more updates. I know one of the things we've been discussing in this agenda is the annual report. We've been doing some more review of the requests that have been made by the body and how to incorporate those changes. So one of the things we just wrapped up the last calendar year, we're making the request to the police department for that data that we're going to need to review. We also want to be making additional requests to other departments during the time that we last presented, and we found out there are all other data points that may be of relevance. Particularly, we know that the city has citywide training, and so we get the police department, they communicate the trainings that they're giving specific to police officers. But the city also has relevant training that may be of interest, like implicit bias training, discrimination training. So we want to incorporate that into our analysis to tell a fuller picture about training and where there may be where we are with the officer training needs, but also in the citywide as well. So tell a bigger picture there. One of the things we've been grappling with a little bit is just the length of the report. We know that there was a request to reduce it, and that's something that we'll work closely with the board. We have been doing cursory reviews, and even from my experience in this field, reducing it to, I think that one of the numbers that was proposed is like 10 pages. It might be a bit of a challenge. But I want to work closely with the board members to see how we can reduce the length, but in doing it in a way we're still telling the complete story, especially because we're telling a few year stories. And then I think subsequent years we might be able to get to that smaller length of the report. The other thing I wanted to note, we put on the agenda the Ripple report. Board member Calavita was quick to inform us that the new report was out. So we put the link to the report for members of the public to have access to it. Our office has received it or is reviewing it. We don't have any immediate commentary at this time. We're still digesting it. And just a friendly reminder, we've been announcing it for the past 2 weeks. We really want to commemorate the 50-year milestone. This Friday is it. We'll be taking a good start to the long weekend. So we'll be doing that at the Southwest Senior Center. Another update from our end. We are still in the process of advancing the lease to the council. Some of the things that's holding that process up are a little bit outside of our hands, but what we have been able to do with the very generous potential landlord is that there's an office space that he has offered for us to temporarily go into to be able to make a transition, we really outgrown our space with the staff where we are now. So we're gonna make a temporary transition, for, a few months until our permanent location can be approved and we can move in there. We're hoping that we can do this, by no later than, by June of this year. There, we have also been in communications with the various departments, like the city attorneys, they have to review a lot of that process, so we're getting closer to our permanent location. And just another reminder, the NACO, they're continuing their webinar series. They are, seeing that they're putting a hard stop in terms of their registrations, but so if you didn't get an opportunity, and I don't believe we sent out an announcement about that, and my apologies for that, but their next webinar is tomorrow, building community engagement for effective community relations. So if you didn't sign up for it, you can also, in a few months, they'll release it, so that'll be available. But we'll make a more concerted effort to make sure that we're giving you the timely notice, because now they're closing off the registration at a particular time. I want to stop there to see if there are any questions, that I can provide any responses.
So I hope a lot of people come to that 50th anniversary celebration, and I wanted to ask you, is it confirmed that our former colleague Izzy Ramsey will be keynote speaker?
Yes.
Yeah, so that should draw people.
Yeah, excited
Yeah,
about it.
I'm gonna do a 10-minute little brief talk on the transition from the PRC to the PAB, but it'd be great to see Izzy Ramsey again. Yeah,
He's excited about it.
yeah.
Also, just to clarify, I didn't see in the invitation, I'm assuming it's a formal attire event.
Oh, that's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
You didn't get the invitation?
I know I got the invitation, but it said nothing about
Okay.
whether it's.
If we haven't updated that part of the frequently asked questions, we'll make a note of that.
Okay, so what is it? I mean, is it or is it not?
We were interested in formal attire, or not black tie event necessarily.
Right, sure.
You said what? Wait, repeat
He
that?
wants us to clean it up a little bit.
Most importantly, just come.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Otherwise,
Enjoy
I'll be
yourself.
there. I don't know about that time, but yeah, I'll show up for sure. That's gonna be nice.
Anything else?
And the other thing I might ask that
I think, just a brief announcement, stipends are gonna come out soon. If you have any training you did, particularly ride-alongs that we weren't necessarily fully involved in coordinating, please let us know. You do get compensated for those hours. So just feel free to shoot me an email. I'll provide a reminder tomorrow morning just so that we can get those in that you're compensated for.
Brings me to a great question. How are we doing on our educational hours? Do we have a good idea where everyone's at? Are we able to organize and formalize hours? How are we looking?
We will provide an updated hours log. Part of that process with our stipends is to make sure that we update that. And once we have that updated, we'll provide it to you. Perfect.
Any other questions for staff?
I wonder, and maybe this has been provided already, if there is a resource that we have access to for what qualifies as educational hours.
Yeah. In the charter, there's specific topics, it gives some discretion to the director. So I have, I think that I like to be diverse with the forms of training, so, if it, I believe it fits one of the categories, then I think we can make it work, so. We do have other, previous trainings that we have utilized before and suggested readings for member Calavita that they provide, so we get that.
Could you maybe distribute that list of readings again? Because I don't think people have included that in their hours that I.
And I did.
And the newest book that you gave everyone, I'm sure that also counts, right?
Yeah.
So if you've gotten to it, it's great reading. Anything else? If not, I'm gonna move to agenda item 6, which is chair and board members' reports. My report as chair is going to be very brief. I'm here to welcome you all. I'm glad to see you guys back and energized, full tables and, light hearts. That makes me feel great about 2024. I was going to also make sure that everyone at least attempted to be present on Friday evening. It's a big deal for not only civilian oversight, but for Berkeley, for the people who've come before us and have done this work. I'd like to highlight not only us now, but the countless hours that have already been put into our community. So I'm going to ask, as informally as I can, but as humbly, that you all make an attempt to at least stop by on Friday evening and show the support for the office and the board and the work that we do. And that being said, I know Board Member Calvita and Board Member Leftwich would like to share some words at this time. Whoever can go first.
I was going to speak about the retreat subcommittee. I can either do that now or under the subcommittee reports.
It's up to you.
Okay, well, I can go ahead and
Sure.
make it quick now. So Board Member Moses and I are on the retreat subcommittee. We met and came up with a draft agenda. And this year we really want the retreat to be action oriented, to focus on strategic planning. Last week, we met with Brian Poor, who's the facilitator from last year, and will be the facilitator this year. And Hansel was at that meeting as well, and we talked a bit about the proposed agenda. And so the plan is, one thing, at one of the board members' requests, I had asked Brian Poor if he'd be willing to meet with board members in advance, have a call or a Zoom with board members in advance, just to get their a sense of their concerns and thoughts about the board, and he is amenable to that. So I will send out introductory emails to each of the board members and him. So if you want to avail yourself of that opportunity, you can let him know and schedule it yourself. And just the last thing is the plan is, once the retreat agenda is finalized, is for us to circulate it at our next board meeting, so everybody can take a look and know what to expect and provide their thoughts. And it's March 2nd, not March 2nd. So March 2nd is the date that.
Official.
Yes, it's the official date.
Is there any other board members who'd like to use this time now to address the group? Not seeing or hearing any. I'm gonna go to agenda item number 7, which is the Chief of Police's report.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Happy New Year, everyone. I want to start with a staffing summary. Our current sworn staffing level is at 151 sworn, 5 of whom are in our field training program, just started our field training program. We do have 2 recruits that are at police academies and hope to send 3 more to an academy that starts in February. As far as cases of interest, there was a shooting at 711 Harrison Street, which, as you know, is a Harrison House emergency shelter. A security guard was shot after a dispute with the suspect. A few hours later, our patrol officers were able to arrest the suspect, and upon further investigation, determined there was a second suspect who is still outstanding at this time. On January 4th, an apartment manager in the 2000 block of Milvia called because he found a resident with a scoped assault rifle on a tripod aimed out onto the streets. Responding officers were able to obtain a gun violence restraining order that was signed by a judge, and during the service of that restraining order, 7 rifles and other gun parts were seized, 2 of which were ghost guns. Also on the 4th, at about 4 a.m., armed suspects drove their vehicle into the front doors of a smoke shop on Sacramento Street to burglarize that business. As officers responded, 2 of the 3 vehicles that were involved in that fled when officers tried to pull them over. The 3rd suspect vehicle was challenged at gunpoint by officers. The suspects in that vehicle ignored the officers' commands, got into their car, and drove away. As far as retail theft, I know at the last PAB meeting, there was a request for more information regarding retail theft in our city. Our strategic analysis team, led by our policy and data analyst, Arlo Malmberg, prepared the following data summary for the board. In 2023, citywide commercial burglaries were up 30% from the year prior, with a total of 565 incidents. When we look at data for retail locations and count a range of offenses that might be considered retail theft, so whether it's a burglary, whether it's a theft, there's different classifications that depending on the circumstances of the crime, but we know that those are crimes that are related to retail theft. So when you look at that range of offenses that might be considered retail theft, there were a total of 1,128 cases for the year, which was a 19% increase from the year prior, and resulted in what was a reported loss by those businesses of over $3.6 million. We do know that businesses in great part are underreporting losses, with actual figures likely much higher than they report. For example, a Target store manager reported to us that they probably report only about 7% of their actual losses. With a 19% more retail crime incidents over the last course of the year, as I said, there was a reported for that particular crimes, a reported loss amount of $3.6 million. I know the next logical question is, what are we doing about it? And some of the tools we've implemented are having operations using data to understand when those thefts are occurring, deploying resources in a directed manner to try and address those crimes. We're also entering a space where we use data to drive generated calls for service that let beat officers know using the data where they can be in the right place at the right time to hopefully be a deterrent effect identifying that a crime might occur in that location at that retail center. And the other thing I want to share about this is all this information that we've gathered around retail crime and retail thefts and the locations of that is all able to be pulled from our transparency hub. So that's something that not only are we able to use in our law enforcement response, but it's also available to the community. It's available to businesses as they want to explore what's occurring in their area. Let's see, I don't know that I have a whole lot else to talk about. I'm happy to answer any questions if the board has any. And I also am very thankful for the invitation and looking forward to seeing all of you in person on Friday.
Right, Board Member Lefwich.
Yes, hi, thank you for that report. I had a question about the status of the body worn camera policy. You may recall that we had and have a subcommittee made up of Board Member Harris, who's the chair, and me. And we had met several times with Captain Okies and Sergeant Ledoux. And we were having very productive meetings. And then we were told last summer that the department was going to revise the policy on its own and would get back to us with the new policy language. And we've asked a few times and still haven't heard anything. And so I just wondered if you could provide an update about that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And I think I misreported last time because I thought the policy committees were still meeting, that you guys were still meeting in subcommittee. I did have a conversation with Captain Okies immediately after, and you'll have to beg my forgiveness. That happened right before I went on vacation for the holidays. And I thought that they were ready to have a final draft to me. I don't know what the current status is, but I will find out and get an email to the board via the director by Friday about where we are on that.
Thank you.
Hi, Chief Lewis. Happy New Year. I'm curious, and I've heard from members of the public who are also interested, how much the police presence at People's Park has been diverting Berkeley Police Department resources. And I know that there have been many Berkeley police vans seen around the block there. So I'm curious how many members you're contributing to that, and whether there's I don't know how much more you can speak on it, but I'm curious what relationship you have had and talked with the UCPD about official partnerships and things like that. Any insight would be great.
Yeah, sure. So just to be very clear about our response to UC's construction project at People's Park, At no point in time did the Berkeley Police Department provide mutual aid or mutual assistance to that process, to that activity that was undertaken by the university. Recognizing, though, that there would be community members that felt strongly about the work that was undergoing, and that might affect traffic pedestrian flow in the area, and that group might want to march and protest and demonstrate throughout the city. We did call in additional resources to ensure that we could facilitate street closures as needed for protests to happen, and provide support for our fire department. So when our fire department has jurisdiction to respond to the university, they don't respond without if there's a live situation, they respond with the Berkeley Police Department to clear a scene or make a scene safe before they respond. So our patrol officers were deployed with the fire department. And at no point in time did our beat structure shrink as a result of our response or support to ensure safe travel in the area around the university. So there was no change to the public safety response via calls for service or patrols within our city.
Just to ask if I may follow up really quickly. Is there a plan right now to have officers on standby around People's Park as UC students come back to campus next week? Because I know that they have been on standby last weekend in the area, based on reports that I've heard and seen, pictures that I've seen. So I'm curious if that's happening in the future, and if so, for how long?
Yeah, I can't speak to what the university's plan is around students returning back and what kind of resources they'll maintain to support the project that they're working on there. I will tell you that I allocate and deploy resources based on the information intelligence that we have. So if we know that there's going to be an event, or there's a need for additional officers, then we work to upstaff that event or that need. At this point, I don't have any planned events that I'm upstaffing for.
Okay, thank you. I know that the project will be ongoing for a good amount of time. That's why I was asking about the extent to which you'll be observing. It's not a discrete event that's happening. So I would appreciate if you have any more information in the coming months about Berkeley Police Department's involvement with the project. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And just to be clear, we don't have any intent to become involved in any kind of security or mutual aid response or assistance to that project.
Thank you.
Board Member Covey, go ahead.
Yes, just a follow-up to that. I'm wondering if our department has made any arrests in the context. I mean, I know they're not on site there, but within the context of protests that are going on, have arrests been made by our police, and has there been a perceived need for use of force?
So there were a handful of arrests made related to moving of barricades that were blocking an area where protesters were in the roadway. So there were a handful of arrests made related to that.
The fences or those containers?
We had a street blocked to allow the protest that was occurring at, I think it was Haste and Telegraph. And an individual was attempting to move the barricades that were keeping cars from traveling up Telegraph. And so an arrest was made for someone who was trying to move those barricades, people that were trying to move those barricades.
Thank you.
Looking forward to meeting you on Friday, Chief. I wanted to follow up on the retail theft conversation. Given the 19% year-over-year increase in retail theft incidents, are you seeing a similar increase in arrests or apprehensions, or is is there a correlation? What is the correlation or similar change in arrests for those types of crimes?
Yeah, I don't have that information in front of me, but I'm happy to get it. So it's available. We'd have to dive into the Transparency Hub to pull it out.
Sure, and if that's available to me, I understand that, that's fine.
Yeah, no, but it's simple enough ask. I should be able to get that for you relatively easy.
And I also wanted to just follow up on, the incident on Sacramento Street with the armed robbers at the smoke shop. You mentioned that the officers were on scene for the incident, and did challenge the individuals. Can you talk a little bit about what you see as the challenge to apprehending those individuals or resolving that case in a manner that would better serve public safety?
Yeah, it's a really challenging situation. Certainly, someone getting in their car and driving away does not in and of itself create a use of force situation or a deadly force situation. And that's certainly not the place that we would ever want to go, especially responding to a property crime. But it raises an interesting question or a challenge as to how do you apprehend someone who does not want to be apprehended, and to what level and extent do you do that? And law enforcement has changed, and it has changed for the better in a lot of ways. In places where force might have been used, different levels of force might have been used to apprehend people for property crimes or misdemeanor crimes. It just doesn't occur in the same manners. We start to look at different techniques and different tools in order to try to move the needle in safer ways on that. And some of that is with if we can get close enough to put stop sticks down and deflate tires or stop cars from being able to drive away. If we can identify license plates on cars or have video image and things like that, that allows us to apprehend offenders, do investigations, apprehend people at a later time. The moving with the flock cameras and our fixed surveillance cameras will certainly help us in that. Obviously, that's something that happens after the fact and is not as preventative. But it's a change. It's a change from when I came on in this profession, where people responded differently when they were stopped at gunpoint than they do now. And I think there's a whole host of things going on that are leading to that.
Quick follow-up, if you don't mind, Chief, on Board Member Calavita's question. When you said that there were arrests made, did you mean that Berkeley Police Department made arrests, or that other departments and jurisdictions who were involved made arrests?
I'm sorry, for up on the People's Park?
Yes.
So I believe there were some arrests made by UC or their mutual aid partners. I don't have the details on those, but what I was referring to were arrests made by Berkeley police officers as we were ensuring that the safety of both vehicular and pedestrians in the area of Telegraph and Haste.
Right, I understand. So when you said to me that you weren't providing mutual aid, you meant in an official partnership with the UC, not in, I guess I didn't understand what you meant by mutual aid if you were making arrests there.
So we have a responsibility for our jurisdiction. So we were on city streets, and it's not an area that was part of UC property or part of the area that UC was engaged. Where the arrests were made was not an area that UC was responsible for as part of their project. So we knew that if a protest group moved throughout the city, elsewhere in the city, or took over space in our jurisdiction, that we would have to make sure they were safe in doing so. So a road closure was put in place farther down on Telegraph to ensure that people weren't driving up where that protest was occurring. And individuals were trying to move the barricades that were blocking people from being able to drive that way. So that's it. That's us protecting our citizens, protecting our city, responding in our jurisdiction to matters within our jurisdiction. That's not us providing mutual aid or mutual assistance to UC's construction project. Was that protest there because UC was happening? Absolutely. So is there a relationship between those events? Absolutely. But it's a different thing than us going and defending the park or engaging in skirmish lines or going into the park to make arrests around People's Park.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Thank you for clarifying. I was confused about the word mutual aid. I think you were using it in a technical way that I wasn't familiar with, so thank you.
I have one question, Chief, and this is sort of back on the smoke shops. This is the first I've heard of this incident, but, are there any other incidents that have been occurring? Because I'm noticing that the smoke shops are popping up everywhere in the city. Has there been any other reported incidents, at any of the smoke shops that have opened up in the city of Berkeley?
Not that I'm specifically aware of.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Chair, real quick. Separate topic, just to add to the line, maybe an update on the timeline process for implementing the ALPRs.
Yes, so we have a list now that's been finalized of locations where the company Flock, in consultation with our detectives and staff on our end, have identified 52 locations. We understand that because of some of the locations are actually Caltrans right-of-ways, there will be a need to seek some permits to install in those locations. We still believe we're on track to have the cameras installations begin no later than February.
Thank you, Chief.
Any other questions?
Just one more quick follow-up. Regarding the staffing report, is that in line with your expectations, or how are we doing there?
It's slow going. Keeping up with attrition has been a challenge. We did a really good job getting a lot of people hired this year, and a lot of people retired also. We sat at 145, 140, I think 146 at the end of last year. We're at 151 now, so we're moving upwards, which is good. I think the last sort of analysis that I heard around it was that at our current pace, that we would get back up to our staffing. It would probably take 4 years for us to get back up to our staffing.
If I am embarrassed to admit this, but I don't know our MOU with Cal, and I don't know our agreements for mutual aid and assistance, and I feel like I really should. Is there a way that your office could provide that to not only myself, but to the rest of the board, so that we do have an understanding on how both departments operate and how they engage, and just basically the overall memo of understanding?
Yeah, I have some MOU documents that I'm happy to share over via the director. I will say, I caution that there's different language and different words. We've used some of them today already. There's jurisdictional authority, which allows law enforcement officers to engage in law enforcement. There's a cross-jurisdictional agreement between those agencies. That's what allows me to go into Oakland and engage in law enforcement efforts, and Oakland officers to engage in law enforcement in our city. For example, there's planned mutual aid, so mutual assistance, where you have a planned event and you hire law enforcement to come and help support it. That's what UC engaged in order to have enough personnel to carry out the plan that they intended. And then there's mutual aid. Emergency mutual aid is when you have something like a fire or disaster or an unplanned protest or something like that overruns your resources and requires you to ask for additional resources. That's all done and handled through the county. So each county in the state of California has a mutual aid coordinator. It's usually the sheriff's department that does that. And there's protocols and ways that all comes out. So I have some material I can send over. You guys can take a look. If you've got further questions, we can try to hammer through that. But that's it. What you look at, it may not answer all your questions, and we can figure out how to get you what you need if it doesn't.
Excellent. I appreciate that. Anyone else? Any other questions, concerns, comments from the chief? I'm not seeing or hearing any, Chief. I appreciate your time, effort, and energy. Have a great evening.
Take care.
Okay. So that takes us to agenda item number 8. That is our subcommittee reports. I'm gonna let Jose, if you want to go down the line of subcommittees and figure out where everyone's at, that'd be great.
Sure, we haven't had too much activity, there's only been a couple, so if those subcommittee members would like to provide a report.
Well, for the body worn camera, we're just waiting. We've been waiting, and the last correspondence I had with, Berkeley, Lieutenant Cummings was in November. And, at that time, he said that they were working and that they would get us the draft soon. And that we haven't heard from him since. So we're just waiting. Hopefully we'll have that done soon.
Oh, I just had something on the Lexipol subcommittee. We're still waiting. I guess a dual poll went out to pick a date. We were supposed to meet in January. Haven't heard anything about.
There's still a response that I was waiting for, but it is actually on my agenda. I know Fair and Impartial is also waiting for a date, so.
Okay, so it's me and board member Cayetano and Moses. And then Kit Saginaw is the public member. If you could add her to that.
Yes, and I do recall it was the second 2 weeks of January because they wouldn't be available.
What was that?
They wouldn't be available until later in January, was the recollection of that as well.
Oh,
Yeah. But it's definitely on the radar.
Let me just say that I think a number of us are just watch that interaction, having difficulty hearing each other. And I can only imagine what people online or trying to listen to the tape recording. I think we need to speak really loudly.
Okay, yeah, sorry, we are in a bigger room, we're still adjusting to that. But yes, just to the point of what I had said, we do have, as board member Lefkow mentioned, there is a doodle poll waiting out, or that we're waiting to sort of gather the responses. We have a public member on the Lexipol subcommittee. We're just waiting for their availability to make sure that we get them involved in that process. They're gonna be out of town for the first 2 weeks of January, so we're getting about that time. I know Fair and Impartial Policing also has a doodle poll out for their scheduling of the next meeting. January, based on what I recall from the doodle poll, is a little tough. There was a date that was included in there that was actually a holiday, which was my oversight, which was the 15th. So there will also be a follow-up there in regards to the scheduling of the date. And I'll allow them to speak more on their report that they're working on.
Yes, we're working on the Fair and Impartial Policing report still. We're working on the data section and we still hope to have that out in the coming weeks to the board. That's one committee. The other committee is the Downtown Task Force report, and that too, we hope to have it to the board. Not next meeting, but the one after, hopefully. That's where we're hoping.
I have just one last update on the conflict of interest subcommittee. So I had sent an email out. And I know, board member Harris, you've been busy and out of town, trying to schedule a meeting, so, do you still want to be on that?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Did you send me an email?
I did, maybe a
Oh,
month or two
okay.
ago, but
Okay,
I'll send it them.
okay, thanks.
Couple quick updates. Board member Wilson and I have met a couple of times on the budget process. The city auditor's office has engaged with us and shared their results of some of the recent audit work on overtime and just, issues and questions about the department budget. So we're trying to pull some of those threads forward from that work. And also, the liaison in Carville with the city manager's office has been helpful. We're trying to basically plug into, there's a process that the city is using to build the police department's budget for next year. We're trying to kind of insert ourselves in the right way into that process so that we can, again, access the materials the department's providing, got our questions in kind of early. Anyway, we're putting it together. We've got, good engagement and we'll keep people posted on the progress. We want to be involved sooner rather than later on the budget so we can make our recommendations alongside what the department and the city manager's doing.
No,
Okay.
I just need to circle back around.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten the latest response from me yet.
Yeah, she's basically, we're trying to figure out this, like, they have a series of meetings between the department, finance office and the city manager's office. We either trying to plug ourselves into those meetings or be recipients of the information that's shared in those meetings so that we can use it as we produce our. And then on accommodations, thanks to the chair and the vice chair, we met right before the holiday. Our next step is to try to go through that last batch of prospective accommodations and come back to the board within 1 or 2 meetings with a short list. So some to-dos on that, but the board will have some info to review within the next couple of meetings there.
The off-duty conduct subcommittee met briefly. We were planning on meeting with our BPD liaison, but they were pulled away to People's Park. So we're still working on connecting on with them and looking forward to it.
Excellent. I believe that's every one of our subcommittees very succinctly done. I really do appreciate that, Evan.
I think I just want to share something with the full board that I found very interesting in going through the budget work, and I'll be quick. It's just, you know, the a great significant proportion of the department's budget is driven by staffing, right? And the staffing needs identified are driven by this minimum staffing standard. And when we have the updates from the chief and we hear about how they're doing in terms of staffing, all of that is predicated on this minimum staffing standard that the city auditor said needed to be updated and revised. And that's something that's been pending, it looks like, for quite some time. And so I just think that's really interesting. The other thing that's interesting is that doesn't appear to be in the MOU. It appears to be something that the department on its own directive can change. So I think all those things are very interesting, and we should know that and understand that when we do bring budget information forward. The other piece of it is the very significant impact of overtime and the relationship between overtime and the city participating in these MOUs, or what the actual term. Mutual aid and contracts with other agencies. So when we allow or have officers doing that, how does that impact then our need to kind of backfill on our side? So those are some like very interesting areas that I think you'll hear us focusing on and bringing back to you.
Excellent.
And there was an award-winning report on BPD giving lending assistance to private companies how that drives.
Yeah, the audit. Yeah, the auditor's been that fabulous recently.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent. That sounds promising, and I look forward to the next few meetings where all this work will, you know, come to fruition and we can really get into the nuts and bolts of it. This is only the beginning. I look forward to all of your policy recommendations. I look forward to seeing how we can actually create some change and have some new understanding about how these different elements of policing in our community work together. That being said.
I had one more. I was just wondering if there's any update on the accommodation subcommittee?
Yeah, we met right before the holiday. We were going through the long list, and we're culling that down. We'll bring back a short list back to the board. Yeah, either next meeting or the following, so.
We're supposed to email. Okay.
We good? We're clear? Everybody feels good? It takes us to agenda item number 9, new business.
Yeah.
We're actually on agenda number 9, legislative and policy updates. Report on pertinent legislative updates and policy changes concerning civilian oversight. Discrepancies and as such. Here we go.
Nice.
So, this was new, agenda item that was, introduced, by a suggestion by board member, Wilson. The need for having legislative and policy updates, so, on the suggestion, we, put in the different categories of potential policies, the California legislation, local case law that may be relevant to the work you're doing, any city of Berkeley ordinances, and the legislative policy. So today is sort of the first introduction of the new segment of the agenda, and I'm gonna turn it over to our policy analyst, and also our investigator, who are gonna, who does also policy work as well, and we want to just go over some relevant, legislation. We did, if you see, we footnoted a few websites that provide you information and for members of the public as well, that can access any, of these, statutes, and current legislation. The Post website is a good resource because it captures the specific, legislation related to policing and public safety. So a lot of our presentation shortly is gonna be from there, but also a good resource is the Berkeley Police Department's policy manual as well. They do have a legislative update section that provides how they're, providing, how they're introducing the state legislation into their policies. So go ahead and give it away to me.
I'm Michelle Berger, I'm a policy analyst.
Great, and I'm investigator Keith Horton. We've looked at this presentation together this week. We're talking about new state laws, or mostly new state laws for the state of California that affect police accountability and policing in general. I'll go to a quick introduction, and then Michelle will talk to you about laws that are particularly relevant to police accountability and what we do here. And then I'll run through some other laws that are relevant to policing more generally. We do want to know the best resource for this and where we got most of this information is the California Post, Peace Officer Standards and Training. It's the organization that creates this training for police officers in the state. The first policy we'll talk about is SB2 from the legislative session 4 years back. We included this one, even though it's a bit older, because it's very noteworthy. This policy basically says posts can investigate police officers and make a determination on what they think. You know, sort of they can flag those officers, so if they're hired by new departments, the departments can reach out to the post and see if the officer has a certain history or not. It's direct police accountability work. And Michelle will talk to you about the rest of current police accountability policies.
All right, so no need to read the fine print here. If you were at NAPOL, you may remember a session on excited delirium and Bart's work to remove that from the language for our police. So, AB 360 was passed, and approved by the governor, is now effective in the new year. And it prevents, excited delirium from being a cause of death or, stating it on any, medical examiner, coroner, physician, or physician assistant documents. Notably, so I highlighted the actual policy mentions of excited delirium in the BPD manual. And what we're looking at is actually, they have already incorporated this new law into their policy. And they've gone a little bit farther in that they're not just talking about medical evaluations at the end. They're also saying officers cannot use that in their reports.
So that's new. Were they using that?
Yes, that was never excited delirium.
Yeah. So it's been reformed, and they can no longer place anyone in a position during restraint that could potentially compromise their airway. So those are some changes that were made. Just wanted to show you kind of how many times it popped up.
Michelle, can I, so also in their policy, in this law and in the current policy, they can't use excited delirium as a reason for use of force. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
More specifically, it cannot be cited in a report as their reason for use of force. That clarifies anything. All right, so AB 443
It's a requirement change for posts. It establishes the definition of biased conduct, requiring law enforcement agencies to use that definition. In their complaints and incidents. It also required posts to develop guidance for local law enforcement for implementing sort of a screening process of officers, via their internet and social media use. So that is quite interesting. It was also approved by the governor.
So they have not done, they don't have the definition yet, that's something.
Right.
There could be.
They've been given the order to create that definition and then implement. All right, so in committee right now, AB 797, Shirley Weber. This is interesting. Our city obviously has one and all of you, but there is now a state law that requires cities and counties to create civilian review boards or commissions, and empowers them to investigate as well against officers or sheriff's officers alleged physical injury to a person.
So there's a proposal for the state. The state committee.
Correct. Sorry, I stand
It
corrected.
would require all cities,
All cities and counties in the state.
that much to be, I mean, even at the teeny city, this would be.
I think there is a population.
I would think usually there'd be a population.
We're working on a very cursory only, we're
Yeah.
policies here.
And
Yeah.
to only say
I do
physical
want to
injury.
say Maryland has already set a
You know, like
precedent
that.
that they
I mean, why would they?
require at the county level for every county to institute civilian oversight, and they're in that process right now in the last few years.
I could see it more county.
Like physical injury, that's crazy.
Yeah. Are we going to make this presentation available?
That's only for use of force.
They have the-
Oh, good, okay. Well, just the digital copy, if you
Mhm.
click on the number, it will bring up the black letter law.
And obviously, we'll look more detail, but do you have a sense looking at that, whether it would affect our charter in terms of the authority of those boards, or simply establishing of those authorities in other places?
This bill would give us more authority that we don't currently have. Yeah, because you can conduct independent investigation, meaning you don't have to just rely solely on a complaint.
But these are only
Well,
physical.
They're only, yeah, it's only physical injury. That's interesting on
But
there.
we can't do that now.
Right, but just the limitation of that, such physical injury.
Yeah.
So it's in committee.
There is language about independent legal counsel as well. The legal counsel shall not in other legal matters concurrently represent the governing body which has employed or contracted with the law enforcement officer under investigation by the commission.
You know, it'd be very useful as part of this analysis is whether or not the city of Berkeley has taken a position on bills, because the city has a lobbyist, and I know in the past I had approached my council member and she directed me to some list and think, oh, the city had already taken a position in favor of a certain piece of legislation. So it'd be interesting to know, for example, on this one, what the city's position is. So if you guys could, you know, go forward, might be able to advise us about that, that would be helpful, because perhaps as a board, we would recommend that the city take a position one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. Incorporate.
We can get from under
So AB 807 is a use of force policy issue. Essentially requiring prosecutors to investigate incidents that result in death during use of force, regardless of whether the civilian was unarmed. So in a lot of cases previously, the requirement was more toward only whether a civilian was unarmed, and they've expanded that. So it's in committee. But the law would expand. All right, SB 50. This essentially stops officers from pulling you over or detaining you for any amount of time for a single low-level infraction. Note the word single, if you have two, they still can. But the file is currently inactive, which basically means it's tabled or between committee and the floor. And it's unknown if it will proceed to the floor.
That ain't gonna do nothing to say something on there.
All right, approved by the governor. I am going to let Egan take this one.
So SB 449, the main thing that it introduces saying is, they're changing the language around certification. Post is changing the language around certification, moving from certification as valid and unexpired basic certificate to any and all valid and unexpired certificates. There's a couple other changes that are in the language here that are too detailed for our current review, but this is mostly semantic work.
Mhm.
All right, SB 852, again approved by the governor. Currently, it's unclear, in the law. It is clear that people on the condition of probation or mandatory supervision must not refuse searches. This clarifies that and says the only people they cannot refuse to search them are probation officers or other peace officers. So it just sort of clarifies previously murky area where people could potentially be searched by other bodies.
Who else would be searched?
Yeah.
The police. I mean, this is huge. This is, if I'm reading this correctly, this makes into state law what we've already passed in Berkeley, that you can't be searched solely on the grounds that you're on supervised release, on probation or parole.
Is that what it said?
That's not what it says.
Isn't that what
though.
it says?
Mhm, it says it only could be performed by a police or probation officer, so, the question
Oh,
was,
or other peace
other-
officer. I'm sorry, I
yeah,
saw
other peace
probation
officer.
officer.
Yeah,
so the question would be, who else would be searching?
right.
I mean,
Parole
who does
officer,
that,
but I'm sure it includes parole.
oh, parole?
officers.
I'm looking
Yeah,
at
maybe.
the actual language, there's a lot of reference to ICE.
Oh, okay, okay, immigration,
Okay, never mind.
aren't they peace officers?
Not
I
you.
don't know. Yeah, I consider peace officers, okay,
Right.
okay,
I want to talk to you about some of the other relevant laws and police that are coming up on the state bill. And issue in the interest of brevity, I'll speak only about bills that have been approved. First is AB 44, which allows access of tribal police agencies that recognize tribes to use PLETS, which is the California Law Enforcement and Telecommunications System. So tribal enforcement agencies, if they qualify, have access to the same communication system that all of the California enforcement agencies have access to. AB 355 is a training bill. It allows training officers to train using assault weapons. It modifies language that with supervision and in the training facility, they practice using assault weapons. Version of what is a little different. And AB 449 is mandating the adoption of post hate crime standards by local law enforcement. Previously, they were only authorized to adopt those standards.
So these things you say approved by the governor, so they're now state law.
You're gonna ask
Mhm.
approved by the governor is the language they use on the Senate bill website, and it's just.
Yeah, presumably they're penal code sections.
The only still one I want to talk about this slide is AB 750. This increases restrictions on individuals allowed to enter a place where there's a menace to public health, examples like a flood or earthquake, and any area where police have shut down access to the general public. And this really addresses individuals associated with news media. So media can operate on individuals who are unauthorized, people who may not have a job there per se. Next slide, please. Here, I'm gonna talk about AB 994. If a law enforcement agency posts a photo, a booking photo to social media, they're now required to include their name and pronouns so that individual can be more easily identifiable. And I believe that's our presentation. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us here. If you have any really detailed questions, we'd be happy to get back to you. Again, this kind of cursory overview.
Can I add one thing about that? Searching of people on probation or parole. For people who are new, that was one of the things that the PRC worked very hard on to change the policy in Berkeley. But what I wanted to say is that people may not know that California is one of only 9 states in the country that allows the police to search for no other reason except that they're on probation or parole. So for the new people, that's an interesting factoid. And those other states are not states to which we normally compare ourselves.
And what is our policy? I know you personally.
So our policy was that it requires reasonable suspicion for a police officer to search for someone on supervisory release. That was the policy that PRC put in with the help of Chief Greenwood and the department. Year and a half ago or so, that was modified by council to distinguish between if you're on probation or parole for violent crime, you can still be searched for no other reason. If it's a non-violent crime, you would need reasonable suspicion. So they've changed it to make it a little.
What does it say about asking someone if they're on?
So there were 2 parts to our policy that our policy changed. And you can see this on policy 311.6 is where all this is spelled out. But the police should not ask as soon as they stop someone, if they're on probation or parole. They should only ask if for some reason it seems necessary. They can go to their patrol car and find out, but that's not what the first question should be. As we had seen on body worn, this whole thing was instigated by the fact that we had seen on body worn cameras that some people, upon being stopped, were immediately asked that question. Presumably because that would allow the police to search them. And so we spent many months, I think 1.5 years, revising that. And so in the context of this new state law, it's interesting. Actually, Berkeley is much better on this.
So I appreciate you pulling this together, and I think maybe this topic will come up, I don't know, during our strategic planning session. Because I think just generally, at the beginning of the year, getting an update on bills that are enacted and then having an understanding from staff about what bills you're tracking throughout the year, like certainly Weber's bill and still in committee would be one, but others. And then the question was raised about City of Berkeley taking a position. I think I know what the answer to this question will be, but I don't know if the prior or current iteration of this board has itself weighed in on any legislation, writing letters of support, providing testimony. Again, that goes to what we see as our role, but certainly I would be interested in weighing in on state policy.
Sure, we can.
Yeah, I think it's a question.
Maybe not as a
Whether
board,
we
but
want to do that and we think that's
individual.
appropriate. Because I think that's how we will be really impactful, personally. So, anyway, again, maybe not relevant here, but a good discussion for strategic planning, a question for the city attorney's office as to what their view is, and even what the city policy is now.
One way to
Independent board like ours taking a position on legislation.
One way to sort of achieve that is to make a recommendation to council that they support, that they endorse, that they lobby for For example, in our downtown task force report that is forthcoming, there's a section on recommendations to council. And some of those recommendations have to do with supporting or pushing for state policy change. Yeah,
The answer to the question is, what if they say no? Do
well,
we have any
there's always
authority?
that.
Whether we have any authority.
Yeah.
And also like just as an initial matter, even understanding what the city's own process is, for, coming up with what their legislative platform is annually and the timing of that, just like we're learning the timing of the budget. Because these things are all cyclical, so. Yeah.
Any other comments on here? I'm gonna wrap this up and keep us moving. If not, thank you guys very much.
I have one for, I have also asked for an update on any legislation that would kind of impact our work procedurally, namely the Brown Act. Because I know my work environment, I'm subject to the PAB King, and there were a number of amendments that went into effect January 1. So I think maybe we weren't able to get that for today, but I just want to make sure staff did ask the attorney's office to provide that, including just a basic primer on the fact that on the Brown Act for us. Some of the things we do here I find unusual, just meeting procedure wise. So I just wanted to make sure that was still being tracked by staff.
That was my recollection. We submitted, or we got a city attorney represent, we did submit the request, correct?
We can provide that information to you. I haven't seen it. Email on request to that effect, but it's possible I just wasn't copied on it, and so I will check with my colleague.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And at that, and with that, we'll go to agenda item number 10, which is new business. And A is nomination of candidates for the positions of chair and vice chair for 2024 calendar year, as outlined in section 1A to section 1C of standing rules of police accountability board.
Chair, if I may, I could provide just a quick little refresher on that process. So again, in just a few moments, the presiding chair, Chair Moore, will declare the nomination process open. What that entails is that a board member will be able to nominate another board member or themselves. Of course, sorry, that for a moment. A board member must be present in order to be nominated. We have a full quorum today, so that's not too much of an issue. The nomination, again, whether if it's for another board member, yourself has to be seconded. With that said, unless there's any questions, I'll hand it over to the chair to kick off the nomination process.
And if there are no questions, I'm going to open up the nomination process. And are there any nominations? Let's start with vice chair. Are there any nominations for vice chair?
Can we start with chair?
I was actually about to comment. Yeah. Say that. Starts with chair and then proceed.
No, it's fair. Let's stick to the letter. Let's stick to the letter. So let's open up the nomination process for the chair.
I have a nomination.
Please.
Well, a question and a nomination. My question is to Chair Moore. At our last meeting, he had said that he didn't want to run again. But I wasn't clear that that was absolutely definitive. And so I would be interested in nominating him to continue, given his vast experience doing this and his guidance. So I asked him if he would be willing to be nominated.
I would.
Oh, well, then I nominate you. I nominate.
I would second.
And I second it. Okay, yeah.
Board member left, which would be to that vice chair.
Okay.
And I do accept the nomination and I am humble.
Great.
Any other nominations for chair?
Or self-nominations for that matter.
Or self-nominations?
Oh,
Okay. Not seeing or hearing any other nominations for chair? That's what we do here, right? That's done, okay.
Congratulations.
Thank you all. Wow.
Just for the record, there is still technically a vote next week where
Okay.
additional nominations are allowed.
Oh,
Yeah.
Just clarifying that for the members of the public and those joining us our first time.
The next session, not next week.
Sorry, our next
Yeah.
session.
Yeah.
Next week.
Yes.
So, that being said and done, I will move to vice chair nominations. Board Member Lethbridge.
I nominate board member Blackney.
Thank you.
And I'll second that.
Thank you. I appreciate the nomination. I accept the nomination. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other nominations or self-nominations for vice chair?
I also like to see, Wilson. She's able to.
Am I going by Will?
I like the ring of it, yeah.
Okay, is there a second or?
Did you just nominate me?
I did.
Oh, for vice chair?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay.
you accept it?
Sure.
Oh, we need a second.
A second.
Okay.
I'd like to nominate board member Cayetano.
Second.
To accept it.
I respectfully, will say no to the nomination. Because I believe that Laura Blackaby in the room, Wilson can do a good job. And on top of that, I have responsibility this summer that might draw me away from the vice chair position, specifically setting the bar that,
What was that?
Oh, yeah.
I would not want to detract from the board's effectiveness. And I still remain committed, obviously, to doing as much as I can for the board. So thank you for the nomination. I'm honored. Thank you.
What I heard was see him in 2025.
Yeah, exactly.
No, he's gonna be past, he'll pass the bar and he'll be out of
Get
here.
me out of here, huh?
Let's see. Any other candidates before I close nominations?
So we actually do the vote next week, next session.
Next session, correct.
I don't have another candidate, but, so you can close it, but I did want to make one other comment about the process.
Okay, so I'm gonna close the nominations at this point, and we will reconvene for the vote at our next meeting. And good luck to all candidates and Board Member Lethbridge.
So I was just gonna make a suggestion that we revise our standing rules. I have always found this process to be unnecessarily awkward. And, I serve on the Alameda County Mental Health Advisory Board, and, we revised our bylaws so that we have a nominating committee. And that committee, then people, make nominations via email, people nominate themselves, and then everybody's aware of, who's out there. And so you don't come up with a situation where someone is someone doesn't want to do it, or, it's just more transparent. So,
I think that's something we can look up in a policy
yeah, it just
recommendation.
makes it a little smoother, the whole process.
Heard.
And I'll just make reference to section B of the standing rules and amendments and revisions. And I'll read from it just for the record of the public. Amendments and revisions to these standing rules shall be adopted by a majority vote of the board, except that the board may not adopt rules that conflict with the enabling charter amendment measure II or the commissioner's manual. So amendments are possible. We just have to say.
Okay.
I
Let's say
think you
this.
brought that up before.
But
I think you brought that up.
did I bring it up before? Maybe because
Yeah,
every
we
year
do.
I think.
Yes.
And also, I just want to thank people who serve in these positions, because I know it's a lot of work. And I'm not willing to do it, so I really appreciate it when people are. So thank you to all of you who have served and are willing to.
Thank you. That's all we got. Too kind, that's good. And that brings us to B, presentation of new policy complaint number 2023 PR 009.
So this policy complaint is a little bit different in terms of the process that we've seen before. We originally received it on October 10th, but it was a little unclear as to what the policy complaint was, or whether it was appropriate to be a policy complaint. And instead, community member intended to submit a personnel complaint. So we contacted the complainant in this case, and we had a brief discussion with them about what it is they saw and what they intended through this process, or what kind of they envisioned that their policy complaint would go forward as. Through that discussion, the complainant expressed that perhaps it would be more appropriate to proceed with the personnel complaint. And the conversation we had with them was that they essentially were going to file that complaint. Several weeks passed, we reached out to them and we were unsuccessful in getting in contact with them the second time. By the third time, we were able to get in touch with them, and they essentially told us that they weren't interested in continuing. Which again, it's their decision, but for its charter, abilities could continue with policy complaint. But we did want to bring it to you, at least to your attention. Part of the incident here, again, it wasn't very clear, and it's unfortunate that we were unable to get further information beyond what the complainant presented and what they had expressed, because we couldn't really get a good grasp of the scope of what the policy complaint was. Aspects of the narrative that were presented to us sounded more like it could have been a community education piece as to like why are officers interacting in this procedure, what's the response like. And we even had a section, we put this forward in our recommendation where we are recommending that the board doesn't take on this complaint, but there were some thoughts that we thought would be interesting. Sorry, that sounded a little redundant thoughts. But there are a few points that we thought would be interesting for the board to consider. And one of them was actually brought up by board member Wilson in terms of the budgets committee review of minimum staffing levels and distribution of resources and what it would cost for different sorts of responses and what would justify a larger police presence. So with that, unless the director wants to add anything else to it, I will open it up to any questions. Again, our recommendation here is not to move forward with the policy complaint, but definitely have those points in consideration, which based on the discussion earlier seems to be already happening within the budget committee.
Can you highlight those, some of the particular areas that we recommended? So one of the things, while you're doing that, one of the major things was that what appeared to her or the complainant as a inordinate amount of police response for what didn't seem to be a serious situation. And I could also attest to my law enforcement background, when an event happens, a lot of cops show up, and then it's up to the unit supervisor to be like, okay, you go out, we don't need you. We don't know if this is necessarily the pattern or practice here, but it's a general observation, is something that happens in law enforcement. We know that we have limited resource here, limited staffing. Is this happening here? And when we're talking about budget allocations and we're moving monies around, potentially looking at these kind of practices already taking place. What are the responses to seemingly low-level events? Now, it's difficult because any event is dynamic. So what appeared to be something low-level immediately could turn to something else. But our suggestion might have been to tie that in potentially to the budget conversation in terms of police responses to some of these events.
One thing I just wanted to point out, we have this training requirement that we still need to fulfill. And I think at one point I had asked if we could have a training that kind of covers this stuff, detainment and arrest policies and procedures, when Miranda warnings are required, when other officers are called in. And I think it would be very helpful if we got, just a half an hour presentation by the department that kind of covers these issues, in addition to the budgetary questions, which I think are also really relevant. But I don't think it's obvious, how this works.
Yeah, I do want to know, I'll let you know, I did follow up with the captain on that, because I think you termed it as spectrum of stops, or something to that. And there was one training actually, when we were onboarding, Michelle, we identified one that goes over California law, and it's some of it might not be as dynamic and engaging, but the information is there. And I'm trying to explore with the captain that might be appropriate in lieu of having, or in addition to having a department representative come and go over that. But I thought it was succinct because it talked about California laws and what the officer's authorities are in the different scenarios.
It would be interesting to have both of them, because you can see what a statute says, but then the real, the practice is also really helpful to look at.
I was also just gonna comment, my read also on the narrative, I thought there were two things. One was the number of folks that responded, but the other part was just the way the interaction proceeded. Because if you read, it was also like, they threw his backpack down, they threw his bike down, like there was sort of just how they handled the interaction that also seemed to be in question. Again, I don't know how to resolve it, I don't feel like there's a way forward, but just wanted to point out, I felt like there was a couple of things going on here that the complainant pointed out. And that's, that is concerning if it's just sort of, you're just randomly, you're having an interaction and that's how the interaction proceeds before you really. That's how it begins. Anyway, again, we don't have the training or the knowledge, we don't know the whole context for this, so it's hard to judge this, but we just wanted to point out that there are a few things going on here in that area.
I'm not in favor of rejecting the policy complaint because I also thought that there were a few things going on here. And I did look at policy 300, the use of force policy, and policy 302, which is about handcuffing. Because from what this says, but it's brief, we don't know. We don't know the details, but it looked like the individual was handcuffed very quickly. And was not resisting. And I did look at these two policies, and with regard to handcuffs, there are some inconsistencies across these two policies. In one place, it says it's not a use of force to handcuff someone who's not resisting or who objects to being handcuffed. In another place, it talks about handcuffs as a use of force. And therefore, I think it would be useful to do a very brief policy just on those issues. Wouldn't take much in response to this person bringing this forward. I'm against just rejecting it out of hand. It seemed like a useful moment to look again at those two policies and make sure they're clear.
Is there a way that we could put it in the queue for our lexical policy committee?
Yeah, well, except that these two policies have already passed. The use of force policy. Right.
Right, so
We did that.
Trying to look at policies that are being converted from Berkeley policy to lexical, but these are already existing.
We spent months on the use of force policy, unfortunately. And so, but these things occur and then they say, oh, you need to look again at that because, you can't always be perfect the first time around.
I think I'm struggling with this because I don't have a good understanding of what the current and pending backlog is, for lack of a better word, of policy reviews is. Even the officer related complaints, I don't have good visibility into that. I don't know how staff is feeling about their capacity. I can say for myself, like just trying to keep on top of fair and impartial and budget, like it's a lot of work on top, to have jobs, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like there's like a workload consideration that needs to be taken into account and how long we are taking to dispose of things that are already in the queue before we just keep adding them. So that would be my only concern. I mean, I have a similar reaction a lot of times when I see huge numbers of patrol cars showing up for things. Like, I think many of us need this, right? So it's not that I don't think this is interesting and probably raising good issues, but it's hard to like prioritize that because we don't understand what the universe is of the work. So.
Any other thoughts?
The only thing I would add is if you put this on the 2x2 matrix of like intensity of response and frequency, I mean, this is one of those low intensity but high frequency opportunities, right? I'm sure this kind of thing happens how many times a day, right? And so there is something to me about like, if this is the kind of interaction that many people are gonna have with the police department, it may not lead to much more, but it probably happens a lot, has budget implications, also just has implications in terms of how people view the department and how they view like being treated and how the public views the resources. So again, I share similar concerns to how much can we put on our plate, but this feels like one of those things that like probably happens a lot. And if there's some tweaks that we could make or suggestions that we could make, but have some positive benefit. So I'm interested if we think we have the capacity to take it on.
I volunteered to spend half an hour, literally, to just add a little bit of language, add consistency to these two policies. And it won't take long. I mean, I share Board Member Wilson's concern about, workload, but this person has taken the time to bring this to our attention and
I guess what I'm curious about is the difference between reviewing these policies and looking for those inconsistencies and coming up with recommendations, which is sort of a straightforward workload conversation, tangential to Lexa poll, versus the recommendations on this specific incident or incidents like this. In other words, the context of these reviews. So is your thought that we would focus on, for example, the inconsistencies of handcuffs across policies, which would be independent
yes,
of this case?
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
In which case I would imagine we would reject this particular investigation as opposed to putting resources towards the investigation of this particular incident.
We would accept this policy complaint and do the review by making these tweaks. So you accept it won't end up as a complaint against an officer because this individual is unwilling to do that. It will be a policy complaint, which only means that we go and review and try to fix inconsistencies in the policy. And of course, that would also mean bringing in somebody from the police department to work with us.
Yeah, right, okay, clear. So Brett, just to clarify what the investigative resources are that we would be assigning to this in terms of ODPA's backlog.
Oh, well, I'm just saying, I volunteered to spend half an hour.
Yeah. Great, I mean, and yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I was going to clarify
Yeah.
that's what we're agreeing to and not to
Not an investigation.
of the incident itself and the
We don't have the authority to do that.
If you didn't follow.
She-
Personnel
The
complaint.
person didn't file a complaint, so we can't investigate the particular incident.
Right.
This is something that's been frustrating to us, but we cannot investigate the particular incident unless this person's willing to be the witness.
Right, which they weren't. I guess I was unclear about from the recommendations here, the directing ODPA staff to carry out an investigation.
Oh, yeah, that is, yeah.
Yeah, can we also rely on maybe on the city attorney's office for some language and alignment relief?
In terms of one of the options in the past setting rules such as track the policy complaint and direct a board member to investigate. I think the definition of investigate is broad and all that being is spending time reviewing a policy that's fine.
Right. And excluding resources from the police department, for example. Okay.
That's what's gonna hold it.
Need a motion.
Well, I need some action, yeah, let's talk about what we want to do here, ladies and gentlemen.
I move that we accept the policy complaint. That's all we need to do at the moment, I think,
And this time,
and assign me to it.
And do I have a second?
Second.
Excellent.
Okay, and we do need a roll call vote for this one. So I'll just go ahead and do that now. List, Chair Moore,
Yes.
Vice Chair Harris.
Yes.
Board Member Calavita,
Yes.
Board Member Lethwich,
Yes.
Board Member Wilson,
Yes.
Board Member Blackaby,
yes.
Board Member Cayetano,
Yes.
and Board Member Moses.
Yes.
All right, the motion carries.
Thank you, Board Member Calavita, for taking the point on this.
So with that, we can now proceed to public comment for a closed session. At this time, we don't have any members of the public here physically. But if there are any virtual attendees who would like to provide public comment, you're more than welcome to do so now. Again, if you're attending virtually and would like to provide public comment, now is the time. Chair, at this time, I don't see any hands raised. We do not have any virtual speakers.
That will take us to agenda item number 12, which is closed session.
Okay, to the members joining us virtually, we will be pausing the recording on this session. Once we return from closed session, they'll start again. You're more than welcome to remain in the webinar, but again, there will be no audio or recording since this will be a closed session. I will now pause the meeting.
We are returning, this is agenda item number 2, returning from closed session with case 007, for acceptance of the findings with friendly amendment. With case 008, we accepted the findings. And at this point, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. And thank you all very much, and good night.